Today's gospel is a continuation of last week's selection, in which Jesus addresses respected teachers of the law, men who would have aspired to be included in even wealthier circles. Not exactly the rich man in the parable, but also very much not Lazarus. And like many of us who, when approached by or catching a glimpse of someone either clearly begging or just acting oddly, talking or arguing with themselves, dancing with no music playing, or walking into and out of traffic without seeming to notice, not going out of their way to help a stranger or put themselves in danger. Both the teachers of the law and the readers of Luke's gospel were more likely to be closer in status to Lazarus than the rich man. But to aspire to be like the rich man or see him as somehow deserving of his wealth and Lazarus as deserving of his poverty. But there are many elements of the parable that are lost on us today. Lazarus's poverty is due to his disability. He had been dumped on the rich man's doorstep because he does not have the use of his legs. It would have been expected that he would have been cared for by the rich man, but is instead left to starve and suffer from bites and infections. He cannot earn a wage and is therefore a burden to his family and humanity in general. Because he is unable to move, he is treated as human garbage, a waste of space and breath. There is an implication that his death is due in no small part to the indifference of the rich man to his suffering and his existence. In contrast to Lazarus's deadly poverty, the rich man is portrayed as being draped in purple cloth and linen. Now, for us today, purple is just another color. I could go to Walmart right now and find an entire outfit in purple for under $50. But in the ancient Mediterranean, the only source of purple dye were the shells of a specific species of sea creature, and that dye had to be extracted in a very precise way. The status of Roman senators and other dignitaries was distinguished by how wide the band of purple was that they wore. The emperor was one of the few that would have been able to be draped in purple. So this man was not simply well-to-do. He was Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates wealthy. And because of his wealth, he does not speak to Lazarus, even as he is being tortured in the afterlife. The rich man still does not see Lazarus as being fully human. He still sees him as below him, as someone to be ordered about. Instead of calling out to Lazarus and pleading to him directly, he asks Abraham to order Lazarus to go to his brothers like one of the ghosts in a Christmas carol. But Abraham responds that if they did not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Now, on a very literal level, we can see a similar disrespect for the humanity for workers when Jeff Bezos sends rockets into space or watches as they explode on a platform, and the people who create his wealth are denied bathroom breaks. And while some may commend Bezos and others for their business acumen, the treatment of their workers leaves them open to easy condemnation as well. But this parable is about more than condemning the very few most wealthy and powerful. It is about idolatry, about believing that we are more deserving than our fellow human beings, about prejudices that allow us to separate ourselves from others. It is about the story of Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old Black man who was killed in Aurora, Colorado in 2019 while walking home one evening. Elijah was a massage therapist. Because he had a job where he was in constant motion and on his feet all day, he was thin but muscular. And he suffered from a circulatory condition. Now, my cousin has sickle cell anemia, a condition in which some of her blood cells are curved instead of round. And when she gets cold and her blood vessels narrow, these malformed blood cells become stuck. I have lupus, an autoimmune disease, which among other things will result in a lack of circulation to my extremities when I get cold. Both of these conditions are more common amongst Black people in the United States. They can be extremely painful and can cause dangerous complications if we do not take proper precautions. Among them, bundling up against the weather. So, like my cousin and me, Elijah was bundled up more than would be considered normal. And under his layers, he had put on his headphones, turned up the volume, and was jamming out to his tunes, dancing and singing along like so many of us are likely to do when the mood strikes us. And someone saw him, a young black man in a mostly white city, skinny and muscular, masked, dressed in a hoodie, waving his arms about and yelling nonsense. Instead of seeing a massage therapist with a circulatory issue walking home and de stressing, they saw a crack cocaine addicted criminal preparing to vandalize, steal, and rob, and they called the cops. When shouted orders were not heard over the music, Elijah was tackled and held in a position in which he struggled to breathe, an issue which was no doubt exacerbated by his pre existing medical condition of asthma. Elijah pleaded for his life and twisted in the police officer's arms with the adrenaline one would expect if faced with imminent death, but which, because of the assumption that he was high, was interpreted as a confirmation of being heavily medicated. As he continued to struggle, medics were called and delivered what has just now, 3 years after Elijah's death, been confirmed to be a fatal dose of ketamine. Now, it is easy to point to the 3 officers or to the 2 medics and to call into question their actions, and such condemnation is justified. Ultimately, they are criminally responsible for this young man's death. But there is a deeper issue when a young black man experiencing joy is assumed to be a criminal, to be a crackhead, and worthy of police intervention and confrontation. In recent years, these assumptions have been given the name of systemic racism. But long before they were given a name, I was taught by those I love and respect to believe them and internalize them. And now I am doing my best to unlearn them, to reject them, to learn to see fellow human beings as human in the process to reclaim my own humanity. Because what Jesus is saying in today's gospel is when we separate ourselves from one another, we separate ourselves from God, from whom we are meant to be, and each of us needs to learn this lesson and believe it for ourselves. No amount of messengers from heaven or even the Son of God himself can make us believe it. Amen.